Hi everyone, this is Chapter 1, Lesson 2 for Blue Math, all about powers and exponents. So, a product of repeated factors can be expressed as a blank, that is, using an exponent and a base. In that blank, you're going to write powers. So, a product of repeated factors can be expressed as a power, as a power, that is using an exponent and a base. So, as you can see, we have four factors here, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which gives us 2. That's the base. The base is the common factor, the one that's the same. And the exponent tells us how many times the base is used as a factor. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 of the bases, which means my exponent will be 4. Powers are read in a certain way. So if you want to look at this chart, 3 with a 1, that's 3 to the first power, and there's one factor of 3. 3 with a 2, that's 3 to the second power, or 3 squared, that has two factors of 3. 3 with a 3, that's 3 to the third power, or 3 cubed, that's 3 times 3 times 3. Okay. 3 to the fourth power, or 3 to the fourth, has 4 factors of 3. Okay, and so on and so forth. So you get down to 3 to the nth. So that's 3 to the nth power, or 3 to the nth. That means it has n number of factors. All right, so here's a couple of examples. We're going to start here with the top one. I have a times b times b times a times b. So I want to use the properties of operations to rewrite and group like bases together. So I want to figure out which ones are the same and which ones are different. So in this example here, I have two different bases. I have an A and I have B's. Okay. So in this example, I have two A's, which I've drawn a line under, and I had 3 B's, which I've drawn a box around. You can use colors, you can use different lines underneath, but it's a great way to denote which ones are different. Okay? So when I do this, I have two bases with A's on it. They're like terms. Okay? So that's going to give me A squared, or A to the second power. And I have 3 B's, so that I have 3 B factors, which means my exponent is going to be 3, so I have B cubed. All right. This one over here says evaluate negative 2/3. Notice negative 2/3 is in the parentheses to the fourth power. Okay, so when I have something in the parentheses and I'm taking it to a power, I'm taking whatever's inside that parentheses and I'm multiplying that. That's my factor. If for some reason the exponent is outside of the parentheses, then I'm just taking what's inside my parentheses. So let me show you an example. Okay, so for this one I have negative 2/3 to the fourth. Okay, this is telling me that I'm multiplying negative 2/3 times negative 2/3 times negative 2/3 times negative 2/3. Okay, when I multiply this out, 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16. 3 times 3 is 9, 9 times 3 is 27, 27 times 3 is 81. Okay. but they're negatives. I have negative times a negative is a positive. Positive times a negative is a negative. Negative times a negative is a positive. So my answer is going to be positive 16 over 81. Now, if something were to happen and I would have negative 2/3 raised to the 4th power, notice the negative is outside the parentheses this time. I would still get this 16 over 81, but because the negative is outside, I would have a negative answer. Okay, so you just want to make sure when you're multiplying things inside parentheses that you're copying exactly down what's inside those parentheses. The next two examples I have are evaluating each expression, given that A is 3 and B is 5. So, and this you don't actually have to write down, it's in your book, but I just write it a little bit bigger for you. So I have A squared plus B to the 4th. Okay, so this is saying A squared, and according to what the directions I've given, it says evaluate, which means substitute in what they've given you for a specific variable. So it says evaluate A equals 3. So we know A equals 3 and B equals 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute in my value for A into my equation, or my expression. I'm going to substitute my value in for B into my expression. So now I can have 3 squared plus 5 to the 4th. Okay? So 3 squared is really like saying 3 times 3. And then 5 squared is really saying 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. So 3 times 3 gives me 9. 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 5 is 125. 125 times 5 is 625. And then when I add these together, 9 plus 625 gives me 634. The other one they give me is A minus B in parentheses, okay? And the way this is read is the quantity, A minus B squared. So this is saying, I'm going to go ahead and replace my variables, substitute them in, okay? So A is 3, B is 5, so 3 minus 5 squared. Now, remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, we're PEMDAS. Same thing here. You're going to use those exact same steps to solve this expression. 3 minus 5, you're going to do whatever's inside the parentheses first. Remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally or PEMDAS. Okay? Parentheses is first. So I have a set of parentheses, so I need to do the operation inside them first. So 3 minus 5 gives me negative 2. So parentheses is done. Next I get to do my exponents. Well, this says negative 2 squared, which is really saying negative 2 times negative 2. Okay. Remember that negative is inside the parentheses, so I have to treat it as a unit. That's my factor. So negative 2 times negative 2 gives me 4. So that would be my final answer. It's 4. All right, so there's a couple of try problems out below. I want you to go ahead, pause the video, and try them out. When you're done, we'll go over the answers together. All right, now that you've had a chance to try out the try problems, let's go over the answers together. So the first one I have is A. A says, write each expression using exponents. So I'm given A is 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2. My factor, or my base, is going to be 1/2. That's the repeated number. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Whenever you're dealing with fractions or negative numbers, always include parentheses. Okay, it's just telling you that whole number is being raised to that power. Okay, so for A, I have 1/2 raised to the 4th power. For letter B, I have 4 times 4 times 4 times 5 times 5. Okay, now remember, I want to write this expression using exponents. I don't want to solve it. All right. So I have 3 4s, so that's one of my bases, and I have 2 5s. That's another one of my bases, okay? So the factor of 4 is, there's 3 of them, so that's my exponent, and there's 2 factors of 5. So my final answer will read 4 cubed times 5 squared. And the last one in this column is C. And it's M times M times N times N times M. Okay? So I have 1, 2, 3 M's and 1, 2 N's. So I'm going to my final answer will be M cubed times N squared. All right? One of the things you want to remember as well with this is anytime you're dealing with variables, you want to try to put the variables in alphabetic order. It's not required, but it makes variables easier to read. So usually you'll do X, Y, and Z, or A, B, C, however that case may be, whatever variables they have. So when you're writing a final answer that's dealing with just variables, like we did with C, notice that they're in alphabetical order, M, N. All right, for letter D, it says evaluate. Okay. 4 to the 4th power, it wants me to evaluate, which means to solve. So I have 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. 64 times 4 is 256. Letter E says -2 to the 6th power. Just really like saying -2 times -2 times -2 times -2 times -2 times -2. Okay? -2 times -2 is +4. So this gives me 4. 4 times -2 gives me a -8. -8 times 2 gives me a +16. 16 times -2 gives me a -32. And then -32 times -2 gives me a +64. F is 1/5 cubed. Okay? So this is saying I have 1/5 times 1/5 times 1/5. Okay. When I'm dealing with multiplication for fractions, I'm just going to multiply straight across. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 5 times 5 times 5. So 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 5 is 125. So I get 1 over 125. All right, letter G says a school basketball court has an area of 2 cubed times 3 times 5 squared times 7 square feet. What is the area of a school basketball court? So area, remember we take the length times the width. Okay? So in this case, they've already given us what the area is. We just have to simplify it. So for letter G, I want to evaluate 2 cubed times 3 times 5 squared times 7. 2 cubed is 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. 5 squared is 5 times 5 times 7. So let's go ahead and do the exponents first. 2 cubed, 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 5 times 5 is 25 times 7. Okay? So we want to go ahead and multiply these. 8 times 3 gives me 24. (24) times 25. 24 times 25 gives me 600. And then 600 times 7 gives me 4,200. Okay. Easy way to do that, 6 times 7 gives me 42, and I add the 2 zeros at the end. So I have 4,200 square feet. I'm going to make sure that you include whatever you're actually using. So square feet in this case was what we had, what we were asked to find. Okay. All right, the last two I have are asking me to evaluate. So I have evaluate each expression if C equals -4 and D equals 9. So I'm going to go ahead, I have C cubed plus D squared for letter H. So I'm going to go ahead and substitute in my C and my D. Again, I'm using parentheses. Okay. -4 cubed is really saying -4 times -4 times -4 plus 9 times 9. -4 times -4 gives me a positive 16, sorry. And then times -4 gives me a negative 64. 9 times 9 gives me a positive 81. Okay. So now I have negative 64 plus 81. Is my answer going to be positive or negative? So my answer is going to be positive because 81 is larger than 64. Okay? So they're different signs, so they're enemies. 81's going to win because 81's bigger. Okay, and 81's positive, so my answer is going to be positive. Now, when I figure this out, I can actually just subtract them. And I'm going to get a positive 17. I is D cubed minus C squared minus 2. So I'm going to go ahead and substitute in my numbers. So I get 9 cubed minus -4 squared minus 2. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do my exponents first, because inside my parentheses I have exponents. So this is like saying 9 times 9 times 9 minus -4 times -4 minus 2. Okay. 9 times 9 is 81. 81 times 9 gives me 729. -4 times -4 gives me a positive 16. So I have 16 minus 2 inside my parentheses. So I'm going to do that next. 16 minus 2 is 14. Okay. When I subtract 729 minus 14, you get 750. And that's your letter. That's for letter I. Right? So that is the end of powers and exponents. The next screen that should come up is homework for you, and so that's the end of lesson 2.